guidance on, for instance, quasi-judicial decision-making, which is something that he was discussing at the Leveson Enquiry, and I will be discussing tomorrow as well. And Sir Alex Allen has replied to my letter, and I'll obviously put a copy of both letters in the library of the House, but the House might want to know what Sir Alex Allen said in reply to my letter. He said this: "I note your decision in relation to Jeremy Hunt's adherence to the ministerial code, which is, of course, a matter for you." He goes on, the fact that there is an ongoing judicial inquiry probing and taking evidence under oath means that I do not believe I could usefully add to the facts in this case. Now, he goes on to say that he remains available if circumstances should change, but those are the views of Sir Alex Allen.
Mr. Speaker, the key issue is who makes the judgment on whether there has been a breach of the ministerial code, and this is what Lord Leveson said on May the 10th. I will not be making a judgment on whether there has been a breach of it. That is simply not my job. In other words, that is the job of Sir Alex Allen. Now let's take one of the issues. Let's take one of the issues that was. Mr. Speaker, I know they've been well whipped. I can see they've been well whipped today. They've obviously got the memo. They've obviously got the memo from the Chancellor, from the Prime Minister. They've obviously got the memo from the Prime Minister's aide, because he's sending memos round. The last one began, "Comrades." I like the sound of that, Mr. Speaker. We need a protective wall of sound. Last week we rather dried up. Please show sufficient stamina for the full half hour. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's take one of the issues that wasn't raised at the Leveson Enquiry. The Culture Secretary told this House on April the 25th, and I quote, it's no point in the part-time Chancellor trying to give him the answer before I've asked the question. I made absolutely no intervention in a quasi-judicial process that was at the time was the responsibility of the Business Secretary. Yet now we know he wrote a memo to the Prime Minister that said, if we block it, our media sector will suffer for years. Can the Prime Minister confirm that in that answer on April 25th, the Culture Secretary was not straight with this House of Commons?
Well, first of all, let me explain that on our side of the House, comrades is a term of endearment, not an... It's not an official title, if I can explain it in that way. Now, the point is, all comrades, of course. The point about the ministerial code is it's the job of the Prime Minister to make the judgment about the ministerial code, and I've made that judgment. I've quoted to him what Sir Alex Allen says, and Sir Alex Allen is very clear that he couldn't usefully add to the facts in this case. Now, I'm sorry that the whole political strategy behind his opposition motion has collapsed, but nonetheless, that is the fact of the case. Now, he asks very specifically about the note that the Culture Secretary sent to me on the 19th of November, and I would refer to him that in that note he specifically says it would be completely wrong to go against the proper regulatory procedures. And that is what, I think the truth of what has happened in recent days is the Culture Secretary gave a very full account of his actions to the Leveson Enquiry, and he demonstrated that when it came to the B-Sky B bid, he took independent advice at every part of the process. He followed independent advice at every start of the process, which is a complete contrast to how the last government behaved.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear about what the Prime Minister is claiming. He's claiming that when the Culture Secretary told this House, I made absolutely no interventions seeking to influence a quasi-judicial decision, that a memo to the Prime Minister is somehow an insignificant document in relation to a decision that the government has to make. The first time in political history that that's the case. Now, if the case is so strong of the Prime Minister, why is his deputy not supporting him?
Well, first of all, let me read exactly what this note said on the 19th of November. It said this is from the Culture Secretary, and I quote, "It would be totally wrong for the government to get involved in a competition issue which has to be decided at arm's length." That is what he said. And then when he got responsibility, when he got responsibility for this dossier, he behaved in exactly that way. Let me just make one point. By the way, the whole reason we are discussing this takeover is because the last government changed the law to allow a foreign company to own a British broadcasting licence. This is a point. This is a point that they conveniently forget. Now, he asked me very specifically about the Deputy Prime Minister. Let me be absolutely frank. What we are talking about here is the relationships that Conservative politicians and, frankly, Labour politicians have had over the last 20 years with News Corporation, News International and all the rest of it. To be fair to the Liberal Democrats, they didn't have that relationship, and their abstention tonight is to make that point. And I understand that. It's politics.
Mr. Ed Miliband! Order! Order! The House must calm down. Order! Mr. Ed Miliband!
I have to say, he's reached a new state of delusion. I mean, really and truly. You know, Mr. Speaker, he just wants to talk about the past. He just wants to talk about the past, Mr. Speaker. He was the future once. Now, and isn't the truth, the Deputy Prime Minister says the decision should go to the independent advisor. The Conservative Chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, the Conservative Chair of the Public Administration Select Committee says it should be referred. The former Chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life says it should be referred. Isn't the truth the reason he won't refer him to the independent advisor is because he's scared the Culture Secretary won't be cleared?
Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but, you know, the clear, he says we're talking about the past. There are elements of this whole Leveson Enquiry, the whole problem of the relationship between politicians and the press, some of it is about the past. And we had a little insight into that when the former Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for Kirkcaldy, gave evidence. And an extraordinary moment, he said this. He said, the one thing I can say definitely is no one in my position would have instructed briefing against a senior minister. I can tell you. Perhaps the victims can put their hand up. Anyone? Any takers? I tell you what, I don't need Sir Alex Allen to adjudicate on that one.
Ed Miliband!
Reality is this. Everyone knows it was the Prime Minister who decided to appoint the Culture Secretary to oversee the bid. And it's the Prime Minister who is clinging onto him now in the face of all the evidence. Doesn't he realise it's no longer about the Culture Secretary's judgment, it's about the Prime Minister's judgment, which is so badly flawed, even his deputy won't support him.
Well, I do hope the England football team are better at putting the ball in the back of the net. Look, the point is, it is for the advisor on ministerial standards to discover the facts. It is for the Prime Minister to make the judgment. My judgment is we should let the Culture Secretary get on with organising the most important event, which is the Olympics. And when we come on to the Olympics, let us just consider this. If there was an Olympic medal for double standards and rank hypocrisy, the Labour Party would be well in the running.
Nigel Adams! I'm really very worried about the conduct of the Education Secretary in the average classroom. He would have been excluded by now. He must calm himself. Mr. Nigel Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we remember those who fell 30 years ago during the Falklands War, Argentina continues to dispute British sovereignty over those islands. Yet Argentina also continues to receive loans worth billions of pounds from the World Bank, of which British taxpayers are a major shareholder. Will the Prime Minister join President Obama in instructing his officials to vote against any more such loans to Argentina?
Well, I think my honourable friend makes an important point. I mean, no British taxpayers' money is spent on World Bank loans to Argentina, and I think that is an important point. But I think even more important is what happened yesterday, where the Falkland Islanders have decided that they're going to hold a referendum to demonstrate that they believe in self-determination. And I think it is so important because Argentina is continually trying to hide this argument and pretend the views of the Falkland Islanders don't matter. They do matter. I hope they will speak loudly and clearly, and Argentina will listen.
Mr. Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister just said that he believes that the Leveson Enquiry dealt with all relevant issues regarding the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, but it did not deal with Section 118 of the Financial Services and Markets Act, which deals with market abuse and the passing of information to one party in a market situation which is not available to others. Given the hundreds of texts, emails and memos in this situation, will he ask the Financial Services Authority to examine the evidence, see whether there has been a breach of Section 118 or any other part of the Financial Services Act?
Clearly there are very strict rules, including the Stock Exchange Code and the Financial Services Act that he talks about, governing all of these areas. The point I'd make to him is there's no doubt that the Special Advisor did behave wrongly, and that is why he offered his resignation, and that is why it was accepted.
Mr. Richard Graham.
Speaker, I'm sure that all members will surely congratulate the volunteers who raised £6.5 million to recognise the contribution and sacrifice in the Second World War by Bomber Command personnel for the memorial to be opened by Her Majesty the Queen on June the 28th. But the costs of arrangement and security on the day have risen sharply, and despite necessary constraints on all government expenditure, would my right honourable friend consider financial support from the government to make sure that veterans and their relations are properly looked after?
Well, I think my honourable friend is right to raise this issue because Bomber Command, many people served in Bomber Command during the Second World War. Many people lost their lives, and it's right that there is going to be this splendid memorial unveiled by Her Majesty the Queen. These memorials tend to be paid for by public subscription, and that's the case in this case, but I will look very carefully at what he says, because the Department of Culture, Media and Sport does have an ability to intervene on particularly when monuments and other things are done on a national basis for a national purpose, and I'm sure the Culture Secretary would have been listening carefully to what he said.
Blenkinsop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due to top-down government health cuts, South Tees hospitals such as the Friarage and Gisborough Hospital in my constituency have had reduced services, leaving both hospitals uncertain of their future. Therefore, will the Prime Minister support his Foreign Secretary, who said to a crowd of 4,000 people that the government NHS cuts are unacceptable?
Well, first of all, I would point out that the increases in health spending for his primary care trust is a 2.9% increase and £8.2 million increase for the current year. That is what is happening. The only reason more money is going into the health service in his constituency because this coalition government decided to invest in our NHS against the advice that we received from the party opposite, who think that increases in health spending are, and I quote, irresponsible.
Question number 6, closed question. Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Number 6, sir.
As my honourable friend knows, cabinet meetings are occasionally held outside London, not least so that we can get cabinet ministers to different parts of the country to meet with all sorts of different organisations. The cabinet has so far met in Bradford, Derby, Ipswich, Cardiff and the Olympic Park. Locations for future meetings, I hope including the East Midlands, will be announced in due course.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Were the cabinet to come to Kettering, it would be able to congratulate Kettering Borough Council on its pledge to freeze its council tax for the next 5 years, and to celebrate the Department of Transport's £210 million funding for the widening of the Kettering A14 bypass. But will my right honourable friend also commit to upgrade and electrify the Midland Main Line, a project which enjoys cross-party support and which will make a big difference to the Kettering economy?
Well, I certainly join my honourable friend on congratulating his borough council. I think that commitment on council tax is remarkable and shows what value for money services Conservative councils can provide. In terms of the electrification, we are committed to electrifying over 300 miles of railway routes. That compares with just 9 miles that were electrified under 13 years of the last Labour government. There's a large amount of support for the Midland Main Line electrification. The decision will depend on whether it's affordable and on assessing the competing priorities, but I will listen very carefully, and I know the Treasury will too, to what he says.
Mr. Enquiry.
Much, Mr. Speaker. Given that the purpose of the Leveson Enquiry is to get at the unvarnished truth about the unhealthy relationship between some politicians and the media, why do government ministers, including himself, need to be briefed by lawyers before, briefed and coached by lawyers before attending to give evidence?
What ministers, I'm sure, are doing, as I've done, is you have to re-familiarise yourself with a huge amount of evidence going back over provided to the Leveson Enquiry. For instance, all the evidence I can find of meetings with press editors, proprietors and the rest going back to December 2005. So there's a huge amount of information preparation, and I think that's entirely appropriate.
Fiona Bruce.
My constituency has a high recycling rate, the best in the northwest. So does the Prime Minister believe it's right for a huge waste-burning incinerator to be built there? No. An incinerator rejected by the local planning board, overwhelmingly opposed by my constituents in Middlewich, and which would involve transporting lorry loads of waste hundreds of miles across the country. Will he do what he can to stop an inappropriate development, which surely cannot be called environmentally sustainable, nor true localism?
No, well, I completely understand the honourable lady's concern, and she's right to raise this issue, and I can understand her disappointment that this has been appealed against the local planning board's decision. But as she knows, appeals against a decision on a planning application like this can be made, and appeals can be made to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. She can make her views clear. It would be inappropriate to prejudge any decision that he might take, but obviously there is a need to take into account the size and the scale of any proposed development, and also to look at the potential effect on any local communities, and I'm sure that she'll want to make those points.
M.M. Morris.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be aware of the latest British Social Attitudes Survey showing a record fall in public satisfaction with the NHS. But my question is this. Now, I'd appreciate an answer, because his Health Secretary wouldn't give me one yesterday. Will the Prime Minister intervene to stop the scandal of the NHS having to rely upon charitable donations in order to fund the purchase of the latest advanced radiotherapy equipment in regions like mine in the North East and throughout the country?
Well, I have to say to the honourable gentleman, this government is putting record sums into the health service. We're increasing the money into the health service, but if he wants me to stand here and criticise the volunteers and the charities and the big society that provides so many scanners and so many great machines for our health service, I certainly won't do that. I think it adds to our health service. He raises particularly the point about this survey. Let me just tell him there is a 2011 survey of people who have actually used the health service rather than asking people about their perceptions, and that found that 92% of inpatients rated their overall experience as good, very good or excellent. That's actually what's happening in our health service, and we should be proud of it.
Chris Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister, will the government go ahead with High Speed 2? A project which is extremely important to the economy and jobs in the north. And if the answer is yes, can I suggest we start laying the track in West Yorkshire first?
Well, I'm very grateful for that enthusiastic endorsement. I believe we should go ahead with HS2. I think it's very important for the economy of our country. I think it's very important we get on board this high-speed rail revolution. I think it links to the question asked by his neighbour, as it were, about Heathrow, that there are many flights that could be avoided if we had a network of high-speed rail in our country, and I'm very keen that we press ahead with it.
Tristram Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before the last general election, the Prime Minister made an important speech condemning crony capitalism, with money buying power, power fishing for money, and a cosy club at the top making decisions in their own interest. Is this not a pitch-perfect description of the undignified courting of News Corporation by the Culture Secretary? When will the Prime Minister show some judgment on this?
Well, if they're looking for volunteers for the Olympic team for hypocrisy, I I think it could be the decathlete there. We had 13 years of pyjama parties, christenings, changing the law, sucking up to the Murdochs. Honestly, what a lot of brass neck.
Mr. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bob.
In 44 days' time, the Olympics and Paralympics come to London, and millions of people will be coming to London to enjoy the Games. Most of those individuals will be totally dependent on public transport to reach the venues. Will my right honourable friend condemn the Unite Union for calling bus strikes? And doesn't the silence from the party opposite on this subject speak volumes for their attitude to Londoners?
I think my honourable friend is entirely right. If we want an example of crony politics, then frankly it is the fact the party opposite get £5 million from the Unite Union, and when it comes to this strike that could disrupt the Olympics, absolute silence, not a word of condemnation. And it's not surprising, because Unite Union don't just give them the money, they pick their leader as well.
Perkins. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The patient satisfaction survey results have shown the greatest reduction in patient satisfaction in the history of the National Health Service. What will the Prime Minister do to turn around perceptions about the failure of the NHS under his government?
If you look at the King's Fund, who carried out this survey, the King's Fund actually say this: there is no evidence of a real decline in service quality or performance. That is what the King's Fund say about their own survey. But frankly, I would put more weight on a survey of people who've actually been using the NHS. And the users of the NHS, as I said, 92% of inpatients, 95% of outpatients rated their overall experience as good, very good or excellent. And I don't think that's surprising, because since the election there are 4,000 more doctors, mixed sex accommodation is down 96%, hospital infections are at the lowest levels since surveillance actually began, and the number of people waiting over 18 weeks and waiting more than 18 weeks is also at the lowest since records began, and average waiting times are down as well. The health service is performing extremely well, and we should praise all those who've delivered that performance.
Mr. Steve Brine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware as a constituency MP of the current shortage in primary school places across our country. This is particularly acute in Winchester right now, where temporary classrooms are the order of the day to accommodate reception year pupils for this September. Can I ask the Prime Minister what the government is doing to help councils in this bulge year, and whether he's confident enough is being done to prevent a repeat of this performance when these pupils reach secondary school in 6 years' time?
Well, I think my honourable friend raises an important point, and I know in certain constituencies this is becoming an issue. What the Department for Education has done is put aside £1.4 billion of schools capital for 2011-12 and a further £1.4 billion for the subsequent year. There's also the opportunity through free schools to have excellent new schools established in honourable members' constituencies, so we not only get new capacity but we also get the competition and choice that I believe will help drive up standards.
Alison Seabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The use of food banks in Plymouth has gone up from 790 to nearly 4,000 in a year. Is the Prime Minister proud of the fact that it changes to his benefit arrangements which are causing this to happen? There's no doubt about that. And is he therefore going to stand up and say, yes, that's fine, food banks are lovely, yes they are lovely, and the people of Plymouth are magnificent in the way they feed in, but will he pass the buck on this and go for gold medal in passing the buck, as he has over
The drift. The Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, let me join her in praising people in Plymouth who obviously do a huge amount for their neighbours, for members of their community, and I think that is all to the good. What I would say is, yes, we have had to make difficult decisions, but we've actually protected tax credits for the least well-off. We've protected benefits for the least well-off. But I have to say, the biggest welfare reform that we've made, which is to put a cap on welfare, where we've said you shouldn't be able to get on welfare more than the average family gets in work. When we put that forward, £26,500 a year, the party opposite voted against it.
Robin Walker.
Mr. Speaker, can my right honourable friend tell the House how much it would have cost this country to take part in the bailout of Spain's banks this week if he hadn't stood up for Britain and got us out of the previous government's commitments?
My honourable friend makes an important point. Before this government came to power, bailouts were carried out with Britain playing a full part in those bailouts, often as much as 14% of the total. So in a €100 billion bailout of Spain, Britain could have been paying as much as €14 billion, £10 billion. That money's been saved because this government, unlike the last one, stands up for Britain in Europe.
Steve Rotherham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, an omni-shambles of a budget you claimed you'd read line by line. A double-dip recession you made in Downing Street. And a Tory-led committee reporting that the coalition lacks strategic direction. Evidence, if ever it was needed, that men can multitask. It's just obviously that some are not very good at it. Prime Minister, have you now run out of steam? Have you now run out of steam? Or is the job just too big for you?
Prime Minister. I'm very pleased that my honourable friend, the Education Secretary, is introducing compulsory poetry reading lessons in class. And perhaps we can start with the honourable gentleman.
Mr. David Burrows.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. What's rude is for people to continue shouting when they've been asked not to do so. I know the honourable member for Colne Valley is exceptionally well behaved. I know he will sit in his usual quiet, respectful fashion. Mr. David Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has called for compassion for my constituent Gary McKinnon, whom doctors report is likely to take his life if he is extradited. The Deputy Prime Minister has also said that it would be cruel if he was to be extradited. So can the government be true to its word and stop the extradition and finally, after 10 years, give Gary McKinnon his life back?
Well, I know my honourable friend has campaigned long and hard over this issue. As he knows, the Home Secretary is carefully considering a wide-ranging amount of material before making her decision. She has instructed 2 independent medical experts to review the various reports that have been submitted in this case. She will make her decision as quickly as possible, but this is not an easy case, as he knows. There are a number of difficult issues that have to be considered before she makes that announcement.
Gloria De Piero.
Mr. Speaker, the popular NHS walk-in centre in my constituency has recently closed. These NHS walk-in centres are closing all over the country. Why?
Well, it's certainly not because the money in the NHS is being cut, because it isn't being cut. The money in the NHS is being increased. But of course, if we'd followed her advice, the money would be going down. What matters is that the money in the NHS is spent to deliver better health outcomes. And I think that is a decision that needs to be taken locally.
James Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the fascinating evidence that was presented by his predecessor to the Leveson Enquiry, would the Prime Minister agree with me that it would be overwhelmingly in the public interest to publish the Downing Street phone records so that we can finally establish what conversations happened between his predecessor and Rupert Murdoch?
Well, as my honourable friend knows, that governments cannot release information provided by previous governments, but I'm sure this is an issue that the previous Prime Minister will want to consider, given the very clear statement that he made.
Mark Durkan.
The Prime Minister will probably not be aware that a firm in my constituency, Niche Drinks, produces cream liqueurs and other intermediate alcohol products. I don't know if he ever chillaxes with these commodities. They have recently been planning a £10 million investment. Over 40% of their exports are outside the EU. However, they and other firms like them on this island are now worried that HMRC are reinterpreting how they treat these products for duty, under pressure from the European Commission with their erroneous interpretation of a European Court of Justice ruling in 2009. Will he ensure that a competent Treasury Minister meets myself and other interested MPs to ensure that common sense and consistency prevails?
Well, I haven't tried one of these delicious sounding beverages. I think if it's all right with the honourable gentleman, I'll wait till after tomorrow before trying. I do understand there is an issue involved with HMRC, and I'd be very happy to arrange a meeting between him and a Treasury Minister so they can look carefully at this issue.
Last but not least, Mark Williams.
Unprecedented levels of flooding hit the North Ceredigion communities at the weekend, causing untold damage to households, businesses and the infrastructure. And I thank the Prime Minister for his words of support
to my constituents, and I know he's aware of the speed with which Ceredigion County Council, the emergency services and many in the local community rallied to ensure no loss of life. But can I ask the Prime Minister to urge all, and critically all, insurance companies to act now with renewed speed on this, so that we can get the communities back on their feet as quickly as possible?
Well, I certainly join my honourable friend in praising the emergency services, who I think did a superb job. At the weekend, I spoke to the Welsh Secretary and also the Welsh First Minister to pass on my best wishes for the work that they'd done. It was remarkable work. In all these flood situations, there's clearly the rescue and emergency part of it. Then there's the recovery phase. But I think in many ways the most difficult phase to get right is when people are going back into soaked homes with peeled plaster and all the other problems that come about, and making sure they get swift action in terms of help from their district council, but above all from the insurance companies. And I certainly will work with him to make sure that happens in this case.
Order. Statement. The Minister of State at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Minister Lidington, literally skipping his way to the box. Can I just appeal to members who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly. Minister Lidington.
Permission, Mr. Speaker. I wish to inform the House that yesterday the Government of the Falkland Islands announced its intention to hold a referendum on the political status of the islands. This decision, which was one taken by the Falkland Islanders themselves through their elected representatives, has the full support of the British Government. The referendum will be organised by the Falkland Island Government and will take place in the first half of 2013. Independent international observers will be invited to observe the process. In the past, Mr. Speaker, the Falkland Islanders have made it clear that they wish to remain a self-governing British overseas territory and to continue living in the same peaceful and neighbourly manner that has characterised their long history on the islands, stretching back now some 9 generations. They have no interest in becoming a province of Argentina. But regrettably, not everyone has been willing to accept this reality. The Argentine Defence Minister recently accused the United Kingdom military of holding the islanders as hostages. And Argentina's ambassador to this country has claimed that the islanders would be quite happy living under Argentine rule, apparently on the basis that some of them have been on holidays to Argentina. The islanders regularly rebut these baseless allegations and have recently embarked on an extensive campaign of public diplomacy around Latin America and more widely to ensure that their views are better known. The Foreign Office has offered extensive support to the islanders in doing so, but despite this, the Argentine government continues either to misrepresent the views of the Falklanders or to dismiss them as irrelevant. And elsewhere in the region, the islanders themselves have often been surprised by the lack of understanding about their wishes and their outlook on life. And it is because of this that the islanders have decided to hold a referendum to eliminate any possible doubt in the eyes of the world as to what future they want. This will provide a legal, fair and decisive means for the people of the Falkland Islands to express their views. The Minister responsible for the Falklands, my honourable friend the member for Taunton, is in Port Stanley today and has discussed this matter in detail with the islanders' elected representatives. They are excited about the prospect of showing the region, and indeed the whole world, what future it is that they themselves want for their islands. Mr. Speaker, as the House will be aware, tomorrow marks the 30th anniversary of the liberation of the Falkland Islands by British forces. Events will be held both on the islands themselves and here in the United Kingdom to commemorate the extraordinary series of events which unfolded 30 years ago. We will remember all those who paid the ultimate price in defence of basic freedoms. For the Falkland Islanders, tomorrow will bring mixed emotions. Thankfulness to those who fought and won, sorrow for those whose lives were lost, and anger that an attempt should ever have been made to invade their home and deny their most basic rights. It is fitting that around the anniversary of their freedoms and rights being restored, the islanders should announce their intention to give these freedoms further expression through a referendum. And in a region that advocates democracy and human rights, it is entirely appropriate that the Falkland Islanders should express this fundamental right. The principle of self-determination is a key part of the United Nations Charter, as we and the islanders have repeatedly made clear and will continue to make clear. But, Mr. Speaker, while the current Argentine government insists that it will only seek to recover the islands via peaceful means, its behaviour towards the islanders remains aggressive in many ways. Argentina has placed a ban on charter flights through Argentine airspace to the islands. It has banned Falkland Islands flagged vessels from its ports and prevented cruise ships that have visited the Falklands from docking in Argentina. It has introduced domestic legislation to penalise companies who wish to do business with the Falkland Islands. It has sent threatening letters to those engaged in the wholly legitimate business of hydrocarbons exploration around the islands. And recently, it has attempted to politicise the Olympic Games by screening a deeply offensive television advert showing images of an Argentine athlete training on a war memorial on the islands. Mr. Speaker, these actions, directed by the Argentine government towards an innocent population of 3,000 people, are not those of a responsible power on the world stage. And while the Argentine government has offered threats and misleading rhetoric, the islanders themselves have responded with dignity and determination. For our part, the British government will continue to offer unequivocal support to the islanders by maintaining a defensive military posture on the islands, by supporting their growing economy, and by protecting their rights and their wishes today, just as we did 30 years ago. The forthcoming referendum will provide, I believe, further evidence that the islanders alone will decide their future and will offer a simple but powerful expression of democracy. I hope that Argentina, and indeed all in the international community, will take note of the islanders' freely expressed democratic views. Further details of the referendum will be announced by the Falkland Islands government in due course, and I shall keep the House informed of developments. I commend this statement to the House.
Mr. John Speller.
Speaker, and can I firstly thank the Minister for his statement and also for an early sight of it, a clear indication of his natural courtesy. It's been very clear to all but the most obdurate, as he said, that it's the will of the Falkland Islanders to remain a self-governing British overseas territory and to maintain the bond with the United Kingdom, especially as the economic picture for the Falklands is improving, with both fishing and oil exploration being prominent. And the Minister rightly highlighted the outrageous aggressive actions by the Argentine government. So can he indicate in his response what action we are taking in international bodies to overcome these? Now, as the Minister said, the Argentine government still quite wrongly claim that the islanders will be happy to live under Argentine rule. A referendum with international observers would put this to rest once and for all. So can he also reassure us as to the clear legal authority under which the referendum will be held, and can he assure us that the conduct in question will be to appropriate standards so there is a clear and unequivocal outcome? Today, we also need to send a very clear message of reassurance to the Falkland Islanders and a warning to the Argentine. In support of the Falkland Islands remains as firm as it was 30 years ago. Then we faced an unprincipled and cowardly attack by the vicious Argentine military junta, an action that ultimately and unfortunately led to the end of that regime. Our military responded heroically and successfully, and it's in honour of their memory as well that this House, on behalf of the country, should signal our continuing resolve. And can I also say to the Minister how much we welcome the assistance given by the Ministry of Defence, that assistance given to veterans to ascend the ceremonies in the Falklands. But that resolve must also be backed up by capability. The Minister rightly referred to maintaining a defensive military posture on the islands. Can he reassure us that the cuts to the armed forces have not undermined our ability to deter any rash and irresponsible action? Frankly, aircraft carriers without aircraft do not send the right signal. We're very concerned also that the stepping up of the aggressive rhetoric and actions detailed by the Minister from the Argentinians on this issue is part of a wider campaign by an administration facing considerable domestic problems. And that is a pattern, unfortunately, not unprecedented in that country blessed with great resources, fine people, and too often dysfunctional politics. And it will be no consolation to the Falkland Islanders to know they are not alone in facing this attack. Spain is incensed at the forcible nationalisation of the Spanish stake in the oil company Repsol, and we welcome the robust response not only by the Spanish government, but also, as he'll be well aware from his portfolio, by the EU foreign policy representative, Baroness Ashton, who rightly said this created legal insecurity for all European Union and foreign firms in the country. And she also indicated that the EU was considering all possible options. So can the Minister indicate what discussions have taken place with Spain and our other EU partners as to how they will ensure the Argentine authorities uphold their international commitments and obligations? What discussions has the Foreign Secretary had with Baroness Ashton as to the coordination of the European response across international fora? Now, while Repsol have indicated they plan to take their case to the World Bank Arbitrations Court, it's also reported that Spain may also be raising the issue at the World Trade Organization, the IMF, and other international bodies. What support will we be giving them in those bodies? And in that context, can we also welcome the crucial support for Spain's case from the United States and urge the Foreign Secretary to work closely with Secretary of State Clinton to bring this sorry episode to a successful conclusion? And this is crucially linked to the Falklands question, because those who show cavalier disregard for the norms of international behaviour in one area will behave badly elsewhere. What will the Foreign Office be doing to make clear the linkage on these issues? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier, the Europe Minister is a thoroughly likeable and decent minister. But the future of the Falklands is of huge concern, not only to the Falkland Islanders, but to this country. And this statement, frankly, should have been made by the Foreign Secretary or by the Minister responsible for South America, who on this important occasion is actually and properly in the Falklands, incidentally along with the opposition spokesman on South America. Surely it would have been better to wait for his return to give a report from the ground or to have the Foreign Secretary give the strategic overview.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for the broad overall support that he gave to the statement and to the government's policy as regards the position of the Falklands and the Falkland Islanders. 30 years ago, the official position of the Labour Party was to support Margaret Thatcher and her government in standing up to Argentine aggression. And I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman personally represents, the best of the Labour Party's patriotic tradition today. I will chide him slightly for his final remarks. As I said in my statement, the timing of the announcement, the decision to hold a referendum, were the responsibility of the Falkland Islands government themselves. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, who is on an important visit concerning vital British security interests abroad, would have liked to have given this statement in person, but we felt, and he felt, that the correct thing to do was for Parliament to be informed as soon as possible after the Falkland Islands government had made its announcement about the referendum that it has decided to hold. I make no apology for the fact I have come to the House today. I fear that the opposition would have criticised the government had we held off a referendum, a statement on the referendum. Now let me try to respond to some of the more detailed points that the Right Honourable Gentleman raised with me. Yes, we are confident in the legal authority of the Falkland Islands government to carry out the referendum. We certainly want this to be conducted to the highest possible standards, and we will be encouraging the Falkland Islands government to be looking at things like our own Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act in order to see what best practice can offer. And as I said in my statement, we, certainly the Falklands government, and with our support, intend to invite independent foreign observers to ensure that the world can see that this election is being carried out to those high standards. In regard to military capability, I can reassure the Right Honourable Gentleman and the House that all our analysis tells us that we have the right mix of military assets in the Falklands and the surrounding area, and that critically that they can, if necessary, be reinforced rapidly. The state of our military preparedness was reviewed by senior ministers earlier this year, and their conclusion was that the right things are being done to ensure that we can defend the Falklands in the way that the House would expect us to be able to do. The Right Honourable Gentleman asked me about Spain and the Repsol case. We have made it very clear to Spain, my right honourable friend the Foreign Secretary did when he met Spanish Foreign Minister Garcia Margallo a couple of weeks ago. We support their stance in protesting against Argentina's action against Repsol, and we will continue to give Spain diplomatic support both bilaterally and in the appropriate international forums. The Right Honourable Gentleman also asked me about the representations we had made, the actions that we had been taking on behalf of the Falkland Islands through international bodies or more generally. We have been making, we will continue to make all appropriate representations. If I can give him one example of that, at the time of the controversy over access to ports in the region, we did talk to the governments of other countries, particularly Chile, Brazil and Uruguay. They are all continuing to allow into their ports vessels with flying the red ensign. Trade is continuing normally, and the countries in the region have made it clear to us that they have no wish to take part in any kind of trade boycott or blockade of the Falkland Islands.
Mr. James.